Permit me to begin by giving some background before I go into the Arab Spring. What brought the Arab Spring? The Arab world at the 10th, 11th, 9th, 12th century until the Mongols came and destroyed it. They have contributed tremendously, and they were in the center of culture in the world. And their contribution was in many fields: philosophy, medical, science, everything. Then there was a decline, like every other empire. Then we have the Ottomans taking over. They were actually, the Ottomans were Turks from the north that were hired by the Arab world, by the Arab kings and others, to serve as soldiers, to protect the empire. But then they looked around, they say, what the heck do I need this king for? I can be a king myself. So the Ottoman Empire was the longest empire ever to rule this world. Somebody corrected me, he said the Romans, but the Romans, if you extend it to the other side and all that, but the Roman Empire did not last 623 years. One dynasty, yeah, that's right. And so we have an empire which lasted long, maybe longer than any other empire. And eventually, when the First World War began, they were already in decline tremendously. The cycle was over. And they joined the German Austro-Hungary War of the First World War. As you know, they lost that war, and it ended up the Ottoman Empire. What happened is that once the empire was broken down, the winners, which are mainly England and France, they took their whole territory and they ruled their indirectly, sometimes directly, on all these areas, and they formed borders as to negotiations, negotiators. Who told me somebody is here that he is leading leadership course. Same thing there. And they divided, they created Syria and Lebanon and Palestine and Saudi Arabia and all that. That is the background. Now the question is, what happened to all these territories? Somebody corrected me to say one dynasty was ruling and everything was okay. Now you have different states. Each one wants to be independent of the others, and the friction began. So who took over? All these countries, without exception, are the military and political aspirant within the framework of the country. And they formed their own organization. Call it socialism, call it Arab socialism. They tried everything to rule, to justify their being the rulers of these countries. But actually, what took over are the military. The army people, I will give you two examples so as not to define too much. Muammar Qaddafi, he ruled an empire, size-wise, not population-wise. How did he get there? How did he get there? He was from a poor family. So he looked and he got a job as a soldier in the Idris King army. And he was maybe more than others, he was let to go to London, to England, for an officer course. He came back, he had a group of people. The king went to Greece for medical checkup, whatever it was that he had, and he put his knees on the chair of the king, and he came and he moved him out. He said, "Could you please move out?" And I'm sitting there. I'm now the king. That's all. There was no fight. There was no killing. There was nothing. The same thing happened in Syria, but under a different slogan. Also, the army took over. The same thing happened in Iraq. The same thing happened in Yemen. So, the only organized organizations, if I may say so, were the army. And they took over. They understand how to run a country? Not at all. As a matter of fact, they were drunk from power, if I can say that. They have so much power, they didn't know what to do with it. And they thought that they were so clever that they were there by being a king or a president or whatever title he put himself. But he understood nothing of the economy, how to run. Take, for example, Qaddafi. He thought that Libya, and they have a lot of oil, believe me, that's what sustains it, but it's a huge country with small population. He said, if I am the ruler, I am the king, quote unquote, and therefore I am going to introduce a new concept, Arab socialism. What is Arab socialism? What is Arab socialism different from other socialism? No, he says. The first thing he did was to nationalize all the group, all the companies, private companies. And this way, the minorities in Libya of Greeks, Jews, and Italians found themselves unable to operate. Now the country, the government, starts to run companies. They don't know how to run companies. The idea of that I am president and therefore I can do anything, it's wrong. The same thing in Libya. The same thing in Syria. Who took over? An officer, Hafez al-Assad, who conjunctura local power play, he took over. And he became the president, which he meant to say that l'État c'est moi. Louis XIV, Louis, the King Louis of France, he thought that France is me. Everybody thought that the country is his. He can do anything. He can rule. But they understood nothing how to run a country. Then there was a conflict. The second conflict was between nationalists and religious. The religious leaders thought they have to run the country, and the nationalists said, no, we are running the country. And the conflict erupted, particularly first in Egypt, where they took the Muslim Brotherhood and put the leaders in prison. So Abdel Nasser, who was the leader of the nationalist movement of the Arab countries, he wants to unite Libya, Syria, and maybe others. And he did begin the process of unifying Arab countries under the Arab rule. But every leader wanted to have his control. They didn't agree. After a couple of years of going back and forth, nothing happened. So you have countries now, they're actually busy either fighting or doing wars or unifying the different territories into one, but no leadership. That the people were not part of their leadership. The rulers had the army, give them enough power, give them enough salaries, give them enough partnership, and he is secure. That is until one day in Tunisia, there was a young man, very young man, who was carrying a cart with some selling some merchandise. And here is a woman, policewoman. She took away her cart because he didn't have license. This guy was so frustrated that he burned himself. But unlike all other killing, self-killing and other killings that were controlled by the rulers, there has now a new method that the rulers don't have control of. They call it, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, all kind of names. They sprang up, and that people can actually stay home and they press and they can see the news, what happened. And the ruler has no control. Until now, he only allowed the kind of news he wanted. Today, he lost that control. So I want to tell you how modernization changes life of people. And this fire sprang all over Tunisia, so much so that there was demonstration against Abdel Ali, the ruler, for 24 years. But Abdel Ali said, he didn't want this trouble. That's too much to handle. He had enough money in Switzerland or wherever, in New York. We have millions and billions of dollars. Why does he have to bother with this? He said bye-bye and he left. He went to Saudi Arabia. He knew that there nothing will happen to him. And this movement, also in other countries, they look at Twitter and they saw what happened in Tunisia. So the Egyptians said, we are the leaders of the Arab world. What are we waiting for? We want Mubarak out. And they started the movement of demonstration. And then demonstration went to Syria and went to Aden, and a whole Arab world is exposed to new movement. That is the basic ideas of development in the Middle East countries. So, what is going on now? In Egypt, as befitting most progressive and largest Arab country in the Middle East, they took leadership to demonstrate for a change of control, of rule. And Mubarak, he didn't put up a fight. He said, you don't want. And then he put him in, until today, by the way, his future is not yet decided. But he is old, he's over 80, and he's sick, and he is in the hospital, a prison hospital. And who the demonstrators were? Young people mostly. They want democracy. They want elections. They don't want to be ruled by dictators, which was at the beginning was seen as a revolution which is unprecedented in the Arab world. And indeed, Mubarak gave up. United States had a hand in that, but I don't want to go into this. But Mubarak said, okay, you want to go for elections and all that, bye-bye. I am leaving. And they caught him and they put him in court, and then not yet resolution of what has happened to him at the end. But that is the sad part about the Egyptian revolution. It started perfect. Young people, idealists, they want democracy, they want this. The Muslim Brotherhood took over. Once the result was clear that the revolution is winning, the Muslim Brotherhood took over, and they are the most organized organization in Egypt, and they can call anybody to do his duty as a Muslim within the society. And the elections, they won the elections. And then they put a constitution in which Islam takes part in the defining of the laws of the country. The young people said, hey, we didn't want that. That's not what we fought for. We fought for democracy. The idea of democracy, Winston Churchill, I think, said once, democracy is a very difficult institution. But every other institution is worse than democracy. You have to be considered. You have to allow the enemy, quote unquote, or different, they allow them to operate and not to restrict their movement or their activities. But you have to go a process of democracy. Democratization is a very difficult process. They never had that. So therefore, once the Muslim Brotherhood won the elections, they introduced a new constitution which allows the Islam to be part and parcel, inspiration of all the laws. And the people said no. There are 10% inhabitants of Egyptians are Copts, Christians. They were restricted. And now they thought that we are going to be equal like everybody else. This didn't happen. And the whole revolution started to take a different movement from the originally intended. So we are in the midst of the same thing, by the way, happens in other parts. Yemen also, there was a revolution there. Now there is a government. We don't know how the end will be. But the leader of Yemen left the rule. By the way, he got, I think, hospitalized here in the United States. Yeah.
I think in Cleveland.
Huh?
I'm not sure, maybe in Cleveland.
Yeah, Cleveland, that's right. Yeah, so anyway, he was here, he disappeared. So therefore, he allowed the process to go on in Yemen to go in. I don't know how far it will go. There is a lot of problems also in Yemen, but the most problems are in Syria. 70,000 people have been killed in Syria. By whom? Why should they be killed? Assad's son, he didn't want to give up. And the reason why he didn't want to give up, because he has the support of Iran. He's servicing Iran's ambition to rebuild its empire in the Middle East. As you know, Persia has been a large empire in the Middle East. And by the way, the Persians are not Arabs. Their country is much more developed. Their education system is much more advanced than the Arab states. It's more like Turkey than the other Arab states. So you have a situation now where there are three major players in the Middle East: Iran, Turkey, and Egypt. They will lead of what happens in the Middle East. These are the largest countries, 85 million in Egypt, Iran also some 80 million people, and Turkey also 75 million. We'll give it a little bit more.
Okay, let's make 80.
Okay. So we are about 80 million people. This is the largest countries in the Middle East, and they all have interest to expand their influence. There is a chance that Turkey and Egypt may combine forces. May. It depends on the Egyptians. Turkey is ready. Why Turkey? Why I'm saying about Turkey? Turkey is the only country, which can you call it Muslim country? It is Muslim. I think 97, 98% Muslim. So I can call it a Muslim country that has real democracy. That religion state is not as combined as possible. So they thought that they can influence the second largest country in the Middle East, like Egypt, to follow its rule, to follow the system, Turkish system, which can be Islamic and at the same time democratic. But many Islamists don't accept that. They say there is a contradiction between religion, Islam, and democracy. We cannot tolerate it. So if the Turkish way is accepted, there is hope, I think, for betterment in the Middle East. I believe. The people in the Middle East deserve better life. They don't have leadership. And that is the pity of it all. So we are now in the midst of a revolution that began, which the direction is not clear. It can be either way. I am willing to venture some ideas how the direction is going to be. The revolution, the Arab Revolution, or the Arab Spring, they call it, is analyzed in too many Western minds. That is to say, sits a person in Chicago, and he says, if this happens, therefore my head says, so this is the result. As the Japanese say, chigaimasu. That's wrong analysis. You have to think Mid-Eastern. Only if you think Mid-Eastern, you can predict maybe, of what's going to happen. And I don't see it in many speaking engagement I have throughout. I am here on 12 lectures series, which I do in the United States. I don't see that the Americans are putting their head into the Mid-Eastern head. And they have to, the battle have to be made in these countries. And the only way they can do it is not to have, excuse me for saying this, no religious country. Religion, and I repeat this, religion and politics are terrible mix. Don't mix religion and politics. Religion is between you and God, between individual and God, maybe a community and God. Politics is non-religious. And whoever mixes these things is going to fall down. So therefore, I venture to say that Egypt has not finished its revolution. I think Egypt is in the midst of a revolution. Until the Muslim Brotherhood will declare that they are religion, they are pray to God, and the president will be whoever is elected by the people. Otherwise, it will not settle. Also, don't forget that the Middle East is made out of many, many religious groups. You know, in Syria, 70,000 people have been killed. You know how many dead people in Syria? If you take all the Israeli-Arab wars, we have less casualty than in the war in the last 2 years in Syria. Just to give you a quantitative concept, how many people have been killed? Now you will think, these are fighting? Who's fighting? Who's killing? Why is killing? Who was killing? They are all Muslims. They're killing one another because he belongs to this sect, the other one belongs to the other sect, the third one belongs. The minute you get religion into politics, you're in trouble. Religion has nothing to do with politics. It's between you and God. You pray, you go to a corner and you say, pray to God to give you good life. But you cannot put God as the president of Syria. Not yet. So that is why I think that the revolution in the Arab world is not finished. It's not the end of it, unless there is a thinking of politics as some sort of democracy. I'm not asking for American democracy. I am asking for the ability to allow the Alawites and the Shiite in Syria, that each one will live its own life. Why do they have to kill one another? They both believe in Muhammad. Can you imagine that the reform synagogue will kill the conservative synagogue? This is what happened in Syria. They put bombs in the mosque because he prays this way, because he prays the other way. This is unacceptable. It is wrong. Religiously, ethnically, culturally, any way you look at it, it's wrong. Yes, you know, you can argue, like the Jews argue, you know. You shout and I shout higher. You write 5 theses, 5 pages, and I write 10 pages. But I will not go and fight you because you are conservative or reformist. That is the principle that I think it should be applied also in the Middle East if we are to see a Middle East peaceful. You know, for the time being, even I want to give you one example. I don't want to go to further explain. Last week, the leader of the North African country.
Mali.
No, that's Africa. But I'm in Tunisia. the leader of the opposition of Tunisia was killed by the government minister. He said, if we won, you lose, I can kill you. This is unacceptable explanation. When you are, democracy means to allow the minority to be able to express itself and to write and to demonstrate if possible. That you won the votes. This does not mean that you can kill anybody who is in opposition. So the basic thing is that we have an misunderstanding of what democracy is. And I must say that democracy is not an easy system of government. Believe me, it needs self-restraint. It needs some higher intelligence to understand, and tolerant attitude. So therefore, while I know that we are talking about the Arab Spring, but I don't see the spring yet. Maybe it will come. It's up to them to decide when the spring begins. We are willing to help. And believe me, do you know how many parties competition in Israel? Can anybody guess here? America has 2, right? But Israel, we are 6 million people. 22 political parties. And nobody was killed, and nobody was injured, and everybody went and voted, and 15 of them passed the threshold of elections. That means they sent a representative in the Knesset. The others didn't. Nobody was hurt. Nobody was killed. That is democracy. I want to end up here, and you can...
We have about 15 minutes for questions, and as I mentioned earlier, we have been live tweeting, and we've gotten some questions and comments, I believe, on Twitter as well. So we'll be incorporating those into the Q&A today.
Maybe they have answers.
If you can, when you ask your question, please stand and let us know who you are.
Yeah, okay.
I'm Peg Griffiths. I'm a psychologist in the Chicago area and a Presbyterian. Very interested in your comments and the broad strokes that you gave us to really look at the Arab nationalism. But could you comment on the countries that have not gone under revolt, namely Morocco? I'm not going to count Lebanon, but the Emirates and the monarchies in the East. We have not seen that because they're the true Arabs. The others are Canaanites and Maghrebites, as far as I'm concerned. But the real Arabs, they're pretty quiet. So I'm just wondering if you could address the ones that have not gone for self-determination.
As a matter of fact, this is a very interesting comment or question, whatever you want to call it. There is a quiet in the Muslim world which are ruled by kings, as Morocco and Saudi Arabia and Emirate and Jordan, although there is some movement, but still, and the reason why is that? The reason, straightforward religion, is the wisdom of the ruler. In Saudi Arabia, a very rich country, and they spread money to everybody. Everybody has an interest to continue to receive. I don't know how much. I haven't been there. But his life is secure. By the way, and Saudi Arabia is opening a little bit more towards women. Now the women can drive. Can you imagine that? Yeah, this is something extraordinary, you know. There is a woman can go by herself. Usually it has to be accompanied by some. So there is a flexibility in applying the Islamic, what they consider Islamic rules, and therefore each one wants to preserve his interest. The same thing with Morocco. You know, Morocco king have relinquished almost all of his decided. The same thing with Jordan. You have a parliament, you have a prime minister, let him run the country. I am only neutral here. So they did not engulf themselves into the running of the country from which today. This does not mean that it will not come, but they can have a long time, I think, survival method. Yes?
Leighton Olson in Chicago, you talked about the military aspects. Would you be able to speak to see if which of the military aspects have had Corps of Engineer and engineering parts? I mean, you got your all the other stuff on. In the United States, the Corps of Engineers was established under Thomas Jefferson, you know, to do things, and Robert E. Lee came out of the Corps of Engineers to learn how to handle the rivers before you started putting everybody in the payroll and dividing the money. So could you talk about who or which Arab or Iranian or Turkish places have had that Corps of Engineer culture?
Well, I'm not sure that you can compare United States or even Israel with Arab countries in terms of how the military. You see, the military in each of the Arab countries is the ruler. Without the military, you cannot rule.
That's happening now.
Especially now.
The Egyptian army, they say they're going to push, what's his name? Morsi out.
Yeah,
About 2 weeks.
if they decide they don't want this ruler, they can push him out. So the weight of the army is tremendous. Now, how the ruler buys the army? Make sure that every one of the army gets enough puchimichi, they call it. Yeah? See, he's secure, he wants to secure to receive his monthly pay. Why does America has a big influence in Egypt? It has because of the assistance to the military. And I think America is doing wisely to support the military. And now there is a question mark whether the army will support the Muslim Brotherhood because of the development that followed the revolution. Yes?
Could you make a comment about sort of a change that is going on, has gone on between the Turkish military and the Israeli military from 10 years, 5 years ago to now, to what you see in the future if you have a looking glass?
Yeah, well,
A comment even.
you know, Turkey and Israel has been very close friends. As a matter of fact, our military and the Turkish military, we share with them everything. And they enjoyed the innovation of the Israeli army. We think of Turkey as a friend, and we want to continue to be a friend. There was a mishap a couple of years ago. Actually, it started a little bit earlier. Turkey, if I may say so, they wanted to play more the politics of the region. And one of the things that you have to be sure to play the instrument you have to play is Israel. If you are not anti-Israel, you cannot be accepted. So this is a handicap that was there. But lately, I think Turkey has now been awakened that to play a role in the Arab world is not feasible. I think that we are in the process of rapprochement with Turkey. It is Turkey's interest, is Israel's interest to be together, and we are losing, and they are losing by not being together.
Do you think there may be some rapprochement between the generals who are having a difficult time now and maybe in the future in Turkey?
I don't know about this. That is too much going into the details. No, but we really don't know. But we know that Turkey is a friend, wishes to be friend with Israel, and Israel wishes to be friend with Turkey. How do you find it? I think if you wait another 2 weeks, you will see a rapprochement, tangible thing, where Turkey will send a delegation to Gaza, because this is where the breakdown happened, and they will license to go there, and will help them to want to build a hospital, whatever they want to do, and I hope that this will bring the things closer. It's in national interest of both countries to be together. The only countries which are democratic in this part of the world.